Let me tell you of a quiet valley. Near the Hudson River, the landscape has a scar, a sunken glen that breathes in the dark. It calls itself Sleepy Hollow. By day, the place is a beautiful lie. The sunlight falls in jaundiced sheets, and the air hangs thick with a floral sweetness that catches in the back of the throat. The scent of decay masked by perfume. The river murmurs a constant, soothing lullaby. It is a song that unlatches the mind. But this peace is a trap. When night comes, the mask is removed. The valley does not simply get dark, it drowns in a fever dream. A psychic contagion seeps from the soil, a drowsy, waking nightmare that hangs in the air and waits to be inhaled. It things the walls of the mind, and the waking world begins to fray. In this glen, a rustling leaf is the turning of a page in a book you can't see. The hoot of an owl is a question you can't answer. The land itself is dreaming, and it invites all who enter to dream along with it. A dream from which one may not awaken. The people here, their blood thick with the valley's influence, are walking repositories of its madness. They speak of phantoms, but their tales are less folklore and more like shared hallucinations. And one hallucination is more potent, more persistent than all the others. The specter of a headless horseman. They say he was a soldier, decapitated and searching for his lost mind. But that is the story told to children. The truth is a feeling that settles deep in your bones here. The horseman is not a ghost in the valley. The horseman is the valley. Its oldest, hungriest thought given legs. Into this waking dream walked a young man whose mind was already a fertile ground for nightmares. His name was Ichabod Crane, a schoolmaster from Connecticut, though he seemed more like a collection of ill-fitting angles and nervous energy. He was a man of books and reason, but he used them as a shield against a profound and gnawing emptiness he carried within him. His sanity was a thin-spun cloth, and he secretly longed for something to tear it. He had pored over Cotton Mather's chilling accounts of witchcraft, seeing them not as history, but as a field guide to the darkness he craved. He carried his superstitions not as idle fancies, but as open wounds. At night, gathered by the hearth, he would absorb the locals' feverish tales, his eyes wide, his mind eagerly drinking the poison. Walking home in the dark, the dream would take hold. A glint of moonlight on a window became the cold eye of a watching corpse. A gust of wind became a voice whispering his name, over and over. He was a tuning fork, and the valley was beginning to resonate with him. His ambition, too, had a feverish quality. It settled on Katrina Van Tassel, the daughter of a wealthy farmer. But it was not love he felt, or even a desire for an anchor in reality. He was drawn to her as a moth to a strange, cold flame. For Katrina was not a prize to be won. She was the bait, the serene, silent center of the valley's ritual. And the master of that ritual was Abraham Brom Bones Van Brunt. Brom was no mere rival. He was the high priest of the Hollow's waking dream, his booming laughter a kind of incantation, his eyes holding the ancient, knowing calm of the land itself. He saw in Ichabod not a competitor, but a chosen vessel, a perfect instrument for their oldest ceremony. His attentions were not acts of simple mischief. but purposeful, ritualistic prods. He would appear on dark roads, not to startle, but to guide, a silent, looming shape pointing deeper into the woods. He would leave unsettling offerings on the schoolhouse steps, arrangements of smooth river stones, a garland of withered nightshade, each a deliberate step in preparing the outsider's mind for its inevitable, final encounter. The Van Tassel's harvest party was not a celebration. It was a ritual of collective mania. The barn throbbed with a frantic energy under the twitching lantern light. The fiddler's tune was a driving, spiraling shriek that sent bodies whirling in a dance that was more convulsion than merriment. Faces, slick with sweat, blurred into grotesque masks of forced joy. Ichabod, swept up in the delirium, spun with Katrina. For a moment, her face seemed to smooth over, becoming a blank, placid mask. The fiddler's tune distorted, sounding like a melody played backwards. The solid world he craved was not just dissolving, it was curdling. Across the room, Brom Bones watched him, his grin purely predatory as he sensed the final, satisfying moments of a hunt. As the night deepened, the dancing stopped and the real ritual began. The guests gathered around the fire, their faces painted in flickering orange and deep, unsettling shadow. They began to tell the stories. These were not ghost stories. They were confessions, fragments of the shared nightmare. The stories began to bleed together, voices overlapping in a hypnotic drone. One speaking of a child who followed a strange light into the swamp and returned with his eyes turned inward. Another of a man who saw his own double digging a grave by the riverbank. They were not telling tales. They were reciting a liturgy of madness. Then Brom Bones, his voice dropping into a low, hypnotic cadence, began to speak of the horseman. He told of meeting the specter on the road, not as a boast, but as a sermon. He described a race not of speed, but of will, against a creature of pure pursuit. He spoke of the phantom horse's gallop, not as a sound, but as a series of deep, concussive impacts that felt as though the world itself were cracking open with each stride. And how, at the church bridge, the specter did not vanish in thunder, but simply ceased to be, as if a thought had been dismissed. He rode his borrowed horse, an old nag named Gunpowder, into a landscape that was no longer static. The world was now fluid, hostile, and utterly alive. The moon was a swollen, cataract-veiled eye in the sky. The mist on the ground did not just gather, it writhed, coiling around the horse's legs like spectral serpents. The familiar road twisted into unfamiliar shapes before him. He tried to hum a hymn, a desperate ward against the encroaching chaos, but the tune soured in his throat, twisting into a discordant, mournful dirge. He was humming his own funeral music. He approached the gnarled tulip tree, a place of local dread, and its branches seemed to writhe, reaching for him like skeletal fingers. A low moan drifted from its boughs, a sound that was not the wind. It was a voice, a grotesque mimicry of his own mother's, whispering his name as if calling him home to his own grave. The road plunged into a tunnel of trees near Wiley's swamp, and the air became thick, wet, and suffocating. tasting of grave dirt and stagnant water. Time itself seemed to congeal. His horse, Gunpowder, stopped, not from fear, but as if it had forgotten how to move. Then came a sound from the black water beside the bridge, a single, heavy splash, as if something immense had just been born. Ichabod's voice was the dry skittering of insects. The answer was a profound, listening silence, and then, from the absolute blackness beside the brook, a shape detached itself from the night. It was not a man on a horse. It was a moving piece of the darkness, a mounted silhouette of absolute dread. It did not rush him. It simply appeared on the road, waiting. Ichabod's terror was no longer a simple fear of death, but a fear of dissolution, of being unmade. His horse moved forward, compelled by some unseen force, and the shape fell into step beside him. He could hear it now, a sound like the slow, dry rattle of dead leaves, a breath that wasn't a breath. There was the rhythmic creak of phantom leather, and the faint, discordant chime of a harness that seemed to jingle out of time with the world itself. When Ichabod urged Gunpowder faster, the ghastly sounds accelerated instantly. When he slowed, they slowed. It was not chasing him. It was a part of him, a darkness he could not shed. In a fleeting, sickening patch of moonlight, he dared to look. The shape had the form of a rider, but it was a void. And atop the saddle, held in one hand, was an object that pulsed with a faint, internal light. It was a head, and the head was his own, its eyes screaming, its mouth a perfect O of eternal terror. A raw animal sound tore from Ichabod's throat. He was no longer riding away from a specter. He was fleeing from his own shattered sanity. The chase was a frantic, kaleidoscopic nightmare. The thundering of hooves began to warp, sounding like a giant, frantic heartbeat. Then he heard the fiddler's tune from the party again, but now it was a shrieking, metallic whine that seemed to come from inside his own teeth. The trees blurred into grasping claws, and the road became an endless, repeating loop. The thundering of hooves was not just behind him, but inside his own skull, the pounding of his own frantic heart. The horseman was upon him, a suffocating presence, whispering terrible truths into his ear. The hollow, empty sound of his own ambition, the names of those he secretly despised, the chilling certainty of his own insignificance. The church bridge appeared ahead, not as a promise of sanctuary, but as the end of a thought. He thundered across the planks, a final, desperate burst of momentum. He risked a glance back. The horseman was there, right behind him, having crossed the bridge as if it were nothing more than a momentary flicker in the dream. The specter rose in its stirrups. The arm drew back. The object it held, his own screaming head, flew through the air. A completion. It was not a physical blow that he felt. It was a psychic impact. A final, shattering collision with the absolute horror of his own mind. The world did not go black. It fractured into a million pieces of screaming light. Then, slowly, terribly, the pieces began to drift back together, reassembling themselves into a new and unfamiliar pattern. The next morning, there were signs. A riderless horse, a trampled path, a felt hat, and a shattered pumpkin. But these clues felt like the hollow, nonsensical remnants of a half-remembered dream. The townspeople who gathered did not speak of it. Their eyes were vacant, as if they were witnessing a familiar, inevitable process. They were not investigating a disappearance. They were observing a transformation. Brom Bones was seen with Katrina afterwards, standing at the center of the community, their expressions unreadable. They were not celebrating a victory, but overseeing the quiet, seamless integration of a new thread into the valley's tapestry. Ichabod Crane was never seen again. But the next day, an old farmer who had lived his whole life in the valley suddenly knew a great deal about Connecticut theology. An old woman began humming a tune only Ichabod had known. A new face appeared at the forge. A man with haunted eyes who did not know his own name, but could perfectly recite passages from Cotton Mather. He had been absorbed, his consciousness shattered, and reforged into a new voice in the valley's eternal chorus. His terror was now just another story the hollow tells to itself. So if you travel to that valley, be warned. The land is hungry. It does not want to consume you. It wants to know you. It wants to find the empty spaces inside you and fill them with its own whispers. And on a dark autumn night, if you feel the walls of your own mind begin to thin, ride on. Do not stop. Do not listen.
You've reached the end of the signal. If the story held you, stay with us. Like and subscribe, it really does help. There are more corridors ahead, more transmissions waiting to be heard. Thank you for listening.